The point of this tutorial is to make sure you understand what information we can gain when we read the atomic number and the mass number from the periodic table. When we look at a periodic table, there's always two numbers associated with the symbol, and depending on how the periodic table is published, the numbers can be up, down, left, right. The periodic table we happen to be using in class is the yellow one. It shows one number on this side at the top and one number on that side at the top. This tends to be a decimal, but you and I just round it up or down using regular math skills. The smaller number of the two is always the atomic number. Now, the atomic number tells us two bits of information. It tells us how many protons there are in the atom. The protons are the positively charged particles. And because the atomic number is 13, we know that this atom has 13 positive charges. We'll just pretend this is an atom over here, and it would have 13 of these positive charges. I'll just draw a few to be an example. When we pick stuff up, it tends not to be charged. Why is that? Well, because along with the positive, there are some negatives, and those negatives are called electrons. And the electrons have a mass, there are 13 electrons, and the symbol for electrons would be E with a little minus because they're negative. Now the mass number, we said, is the bigger of the two numbers, so this mass number is 27. The mass number is saying when you pick up an atom of this substance, an atom of aluminum, it will have a mass of 27, and the units are not grams, they're much smaller than grams, they're called atomic mass units, but let's just stay with the numbers for now. When you pick up an atom of aluminum, it'll have a mass of 27. Now, some of that mass comes from the protons, and some of that mass comes from the neutrons. But the electrons, they hardly contribute any mass at all, so we just pretend they have no mass at all. Okay? We say here the mass is nearly zero. So, if the mass number is 27, and we know there are 13 protons, then to figure out the number of neutrons, we just have to take that 27 and subtract the number of protons, and we get 14. That's how many neutrons there are, because 13 plus 14 equals 27. The 13 being the mass contributed by the protons, and the 14 being the mass contributed by the neutrons. And that's where the mass of the atom comes from. In the next example, they're only giving us the number of protons, and we have to figure out all the other values. Well, if the number of protons is 12, then we know automatically the atomic number is 12. And we could look it up on the periodic table and see which symbol is in the box that has an atomic number of 12. And we see it's magnesium. And along with that number 12 is another number, the mass number. Because that atom has 12 protons, we know it has 12 electrons. Because that atom has a mass of 24, we know that the number of neutrons is 24, take away the protons, which is 12. When they tell us there are 8 electrons, how many protons are there? When they tell us there are 8 electrons, what's the atomic number? Because the atomic number always tells you how many protons, and it also tells you how many electrons. We can look on the periodic table and see the symbol is oxygen, and the other number is 16. If the mass is 16 and 8 units of that mass come from protons, then we know that the rest must be neutrons. In this case, they give us the atomic number, so we can go directly to the periodic table and see that the element is sodium. The atomic number is 11, so how many protons are there? How many electrons? What's the mass number? That mass is contributed by two particles, the protons and the neutrons. We know that there are 11 protons, so therefore there must be 12 neutrons, because 11 protons and 12 neutrons equal 23. The 32 is the mass number. This takes a little more work. We've got to look around and find a particle, an element that has that mass number. Before long, you found it, it's sulfur. And now we know the atomic number is 16, proton 16, electron 16. The electrons have mass, but hardly anything worthwhile considering when we consider the mass number. So that mass of 32 comes from the 16 protons and the 16 neutrons. So 16 plus 16 is 32.